gloom, forget the fact that everything wrong has happened. Don't try to tell yourself all the time it was just your fault. That won't do it either. You can get so hang-dogged in the presence of yourself that you hardly want to keep on living. Forget it all for the moment and begin to think of how the chemistry itself can be changed. The nice thing about changing chemistry is the fact that it does not appear to relate directly to your major problems. If, for instance, you've been a little selfish or a little unkind or a little nagging during the years, or if you've judged people a little unwisely, work not on these problems, but on the general enrichment of your life. Psychosis is almost always present in a life that is internally not rich enough. Psychic tensions and pressures and the melancholy mood come as the result of a life that is not sufficiently directive or directed toward interesting or worthwhile achievements. The individual has permitted himself to become weary, permitted himself to become lazy to progress. He may be busy every minute, but he's lazy to those things which would help him to solve his problem. So if these problems exist, begin a survey of different values in your life. And the first problem is, where are you getting adequate, creative self-expression? Are you doing interesting, pleasant, and happy things as a result of your own planning to do so? Are you growing by conscious effort every day? If you're not, you're shrinking, whether you know it or not. Are you finding means of satisfying your own natural instinct for betterness, for greater happiness? Don't worry about the 15 things that are wrong. Forget about them for the moment. Forget about the mistakes you are making. Stop blaming yourself for them, even if you know you're to blame. Forget everything except one thing. What are we doing now that is right? What are we doing now that pleases, that brings opportunity, that opens up something? What are we doing this minute that we're proud of? What are we doing that is helping us to grow or know or express more adequately? Make the bid a completely positive one. Have no concern at the moment over all these things that did not work out. Forget the unpleasant relatives. Forget the dishonorable friends. And simply say, what am I doing? What am I holding in my hands? What am I building? What am I creating? What am I planning at this moment that is good? This is the beginning of the setting up of a counter-habit, a habit that goes in a new direction. And the symbol of progress or creativity, of the making of things, is very important in our own justification of life. Every person is either creating or destroying, whether he knows it or not. Any individual who is tearing things down is destroying. Any individual who is tearing himself down is destroying. In most cases, we don't destroy big things, and we're not always sure we're destroying anything. But take the instinct to destroy and stick it out in front where you can see it. When you criticize another person, You are tearing something. You are tearing it apart. Therefore, take a piece of paper, sit down and look at yourself and tear it up. This is criticism. This is exactly what it amounts to. When you criticize a person, you're tearing up your likeness or picture of that person. Sometimes it may help to tear up the picture. It's better to tear up the picture than tear up the person. Very often, if we get rid of the feeling by an action, we don't have it anymore. We write letters telling people what we think of them. We can make a wonderful project out of it as long as we never mail the letters. And many persons have found this a very great help. They got it out of the system. But just as this relieves a certain kind of pressure, so the constructive or positive symbolism creates a new release on a positive level. To create something with the hands is a symbol of creativity. Putting a model ship together shows a tendency to integrate. Here is an interesting problem that I think many people have actually fallen into without realizing it, and that is the hobby shop and the various rather complicated things that are manufactured now for persons to assemble on their own time. 25 years ago, about all you could find or put together was an occasional jigsaw puzzle. Today you have hundreds of different model structures. And maybe we think that these belong to the world of childhood. But if they do, so do we. And our own growing up is not as real as we thought it was. But wherever, symbolically, we follow the instructions in a book or on a sheet of paper, and we carefully and orderly and neatly and as nicely as we can assemble a model aeroplane or a copy of the Mayflower or some other sailing ship of the Viking period, wherever we put these things together, paint them and finish them, and finally hang them on the mantel or put them somewhere where no one on earth will admire them anyway, yet we have done something. We have used a creative symbolism to put something together. We have developed the continuity to stay with it and do it. We have had an opportunity to use our hands, an opportunity that has become rather strange to many of us because of the efficiency and the mechanism of our modern world. So by the same device that we see in the Rorschach blot, some dismal thing, we can also become aware in the process of putting something together of the integration process in our own natures. This integration is a putting of the personality together lawfully, or according to the rules or the sketch or the outline or the instructions that are given to us. Wherever we have an instinct to build or create, we are safer than when we have an instinct to tear down. Also, the moment we take any impulse or instinct of any kind and transform it into an action, it gains tremendous vitality. Most introverts are non-active, or as they themselves say, they are busy inside. Well, you can be very busy inside and be very sick as a result. The release of expression through action has peculiar validity. It is one way of convincing ourselves. The moment we perform an action, the consequence of that action becomes known to us by a reflex of our own sensory perception. We can hope, we can think, we can believe, and it all happens inside. It does not cause a stimulation in the sensory perception gamut. But if we are determined to transform an idea into action, we go out and we do something. We decide, for instance, that we will draw a picture. So we take pencil in hand and we draw the picture. And the moment we do so, we see the picture we have drawn with our own eyes, and the image is returned again into our own subjective. Tremendous intensification of impact results from the fact that our picture comes back to us again through the outward sensory reflexes. If he gets this concept, he's going to then try and interpret his own pictures, which may only lead him into further complications. What we are trying to imply, rather, is that just as we arrive at certain conclusions which we do not rationalize, but which cause us to get into trouble, so we can arrive at certain other conclusions which we do not rationalize, but which will get us out of trouble. And the grand pattern of these is so simple that almost anyone can recognize them. Namely, that these patterns must not offend us, that they must advance our creativity, our ingenuity. They must create interests which cause us to want to finish them. And having so accomplished, perhaps lure us on to do more of the same. As we change in many ways, or in any one of many ways, we observe that the psychic compound changes. One healthy interest may affect a complete personality complex. One new attitude, not relating directly to the problems we are suffering from, may help us to cure those problems. The development of a hobby may reintegrate a totally unbalanced life. The individual never attacks any of his vices. He simply finds something constructive and interesting, and the vices starve to death, which is the only way to get rid of them. This means that in broad formula, remedy is always an outgrowing of the ailment. And the outgrowing of a negative attitude is rather easy because there is really no direction you can move from the bottom except up. When you get down as far as you can go, that's it. There is only one other direction. And as almost any action will represent growth when confronted with the opposite of no action, we find a wide variety of possibilities and opportunities offered to us to improve a situation. Always try to compensate for an intensity by a constructive action that takes our mind off of the intensity. Someone will say, well, I'll never get my mind off of this intensity. This one is really something. And we will watch them fight to hold their mind to that intensity. And sometimes you can't get it off. So it is again important to have these persons come in contact with new situations. An example of this was a person who was extremely depressed by a restricted home environment. This home environment came as a result of retiring from business and the general feeling that they were too old to accomplish anything. So they settled down for several years, becoming more and more melancholy, critical, hypercritical, negative, and fussy. And perhaps the fussy part was the worst. All the talking in the world did not do anything about it. What actually corrected the whole situation was a chance conversation with another person